Howdy YouTube, and welcome to another episode of the Gunman. So today we've got a full respray on this XD Ford Falcon. So the XD Ford Falcons were produced here in Australia, obviously by Ford Australia from 1979 to 1982. This thing here has got a big V8 in it. I think it's a 351 Cleveland, but yeah, a pretty cool old Aussie car. I actually used to own the facelift of this, which was the XF, and viewers of the channel for a long time may remember that in say 2014, which would have been the first year of me being a YouTuber, I did my old XF up to look like the Peter Jackson racing livery. So that was a pretty cool project. But here we go. I've come full circle. 10 years down the track, now I've got another blue, actually, nice color blue. Blueprint is a more modern color, so I think started seeing it on the Fords of the era around sort of 2005 onwards type thing. It's a beautiful color, as you saw inside the jam. So all we got to do, look, this job here, it's not a concourse respray. It's basically just a nice, tidy, neat respray that we've been tasked with here. So we gave it a good block down. We did inspect it for any damage, but there really wasn't much. There was a very small dent in the roof on the passenger side, but apart from that, it was all pretty good. But yeah, what I'm putting down first is some wet on wet primer. A few reasons for that. It sort of helps you with the prep work. Let's just say that you were to miss, say, a block mark or a bit of a deeper sanding scratch. The wet on wet will sort of help fill that up. It's also going to help with any cut throughs, so if you've got any little spots where there's bare metal. But more importantly than anything on this specific job, the coverage on this color is terrible. Now that's not a it's pretty common really with this kind of a color. So yeah, it's to be expected, and as long as you know about it, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. But I did a few spray outs. So I did one with the mid gray, and then one with the dark gray, and then one with the darkest gray. And I found that the G6, which is what the primer I put down, I found that was the best shade. So it still needed an extra coat, so I went with the G6 primer and 4 coats. But as you can see, that first coat, I'm just smashing it on. I want to get it on nice and heavy. I do want to kind of start to get some coverage up. Now, as it turns out, even after my third coat, I could still see through. So even after putting this on quite wet, wetter than I would never usually go this wet on my first coat. I'd usually go sort of medium to wet, but I'd call this a wet coat, right? And like I said, that's just for the coverage. As I continue on, I did decide to actually start walking the side just in case, because of the poor coverage, let's just say you overlap on the front edge of the door, it might look great in the spray booth, but then when you get that out in the sun, you'll have a heavy patch where you've overlapped. So I'm using the Envirobase, which is the PPG's waterborne base coat range. And generally I'll thin that down at 25%, right? Now that helps it dry, so that helps sort of any pullback. What can happen with the waterborne base coats, when you go to clear over them, if the base coat isn't like properly dry, or if you don't put enough thinners in it, you'll get a bit of pullback or a bit of dieback from that base coat in your clear. It actually took me a while to figure out what was going on when I was using this from the very start when I was using Envirobase, but turns out if you put a little bit extra thinners in it, you do actually reduce the chances of having that dieback. But I do mention that on this one, because of that coverage, if I was to put the usual 25% in, potentially I would have just had to put an extra coat on. So you're sort of nearly robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. So yeah, I did end up going for 20% reducer in the base coat. That did help the coverage. But again, like I mentioned, it's going to pinch back a little bit more. I have the likeliness to pinch back a little bit more. But what I did, I just gave it a 15-minute bake. So I put the 4 coats of base coat down. 3 coats wasn't quite enough. So my rule of thumb has always been get it covered, so it's visually covered, and then put one more coat on. So it wasn't quite visually covered after the second. It was visually covered after the third. But like I say, always put an extra coat on once you think that you've got it covered. So but because I did put that extra coat on, and I did put that a little bit less reducer in, it definitely needed the bake. Now it didn't pull back too bad, but it did pinch back a little bit. But I'm lucky enough to have a good crew where we are, and Baxter, he's my dude that does the polishing. he knows exactly how to treat that kind of stuff. He'll know to get the buff in and sort of heat it up, get the heat the paint up, and it sort of just brings that gloss up a bit. So that was good. Either way, onto the clear coat. The spray gun I'm using is the old school Envirobase DV1. The clear coat I'm using is the PPG LVC 105 clear, and it's definitely my favorite PPG clear, but it's it can be a little bit tricky if you've never used this clear. Just be a little bit careful with it. It wants to run. That's basically all that we'll want to do, and just be really and the key, right? Because when I first started using it, I'm like, wow, this is awesome, and then you'll like just spray it like a normal clear, and then you get a big run on the next job, and I'm talking big ones, right? So I sort of figured it out myself. The best way to spray it was ultra high pressure on that first coat. So I'm talking 38 PSI. And also you want like a smaller nozzle on your gun, right? So I'm using the 1.2 mil on this gun, and that is perfect. Crank that pressure up. It's quite a thick clear, but it flows. So that's the thing. I've run it through a viscosity cup at something like 20 or 21 seconds in winter, right? But you don't want to just go and load it up with thinners, because it's not that kind of clear. It's not a normal clear. This clear, right, after you bake it, you'll be able to give it like a 25-minute bake, and you can straight up get a razor blade onto it. So it'll be dry all the way into the middle. Whereas the legacy clear or a normal clear, like that'll take weeks until you can actually get a razor blade onto it, unless you sort of get infrared lights onto it and give it a couple of hours under the infrared lights at say 80 or 90 degrees. But yeah, so on my second coat, I do drop that pressure down. So I drop the pressure down to around 30, 32 PSI. I'll probably go, closer to the 30 PSI on roof, bonnet, and boot, just to sort of get a bit more material on there. But yeah, sort of closer to the 32 on the sides. Yeah, so whilst we do use PPG here, it's definitely not my favorite brand of paint. Like even the 105, like I do quite like that clear, but for me to like a product, it's got to be good the whole way through. I don't just say, oh, it's good in the booth, and then I'll just push the job out to the detailer and worry about him. I worry about the whole procedure from primer all the way through to the polishing and all of that. So the way that a clear holds up is a very important thing for me to say that's a great clear. So I actually don't particularly like the way that the 105 clear holds up. It scratches way too easy. So I've seen some people try to polish it and they just get swirl marks all through it, or even with the DA on a black. I've had some detailers come out thinking they're hot shit, thinking they know exactly how to get rid of swirl marks on blacks. And with the 105 clear, they just can't do it. The only way you can do it is with the rotary. And then, what are my other options? I could use the 136 clear, and that just never dries. I'm talking years down the track. You can still put your fingernail into it. So, yeah, I'm sort of in this situation where I'm working at the moment, where I've always got to use products that I'm not really that 100% happy with. But look, I can make them work, don't get me wrong, but it just wouldn't be my first choice. And I'm not saying they're bad products, They're let's just say median would be like a 5, I'd say PPG might be a 6. You'd be stretching, maybe a 7, yeah, but you wouldn't call it an 8. Whereas some of those Standox clears, that'd be easily 9s or 10s. Liquid glass, I'd give that a 10. So as far as paint usage goes on this one, I mixed up 4 litres and I was left over with about, say, 300 mils. So I was actually pretty impressed with that. I was expecting to use more than that. I did have a bit more paint in there that, I was expecting to say use 5 litres just because of the poor coverage, but it actually wasn't as bad as what I thought. So yeah, like I say, 4 litres was enough for the colour, and I would have used about the same with clear coat. So on the body, I would have, from memory, it was about 3 litres of clear coat on the body, and then I would have used another litre on the bumper and bonnet and stuff as well. So just to give you guys a bit of a rough estimate on how much you're going to need. But again, if you were to say paint the insides, that would be an increase. And I had some guy ask me recently, oh, how much would I use for my car? And there is definitely some variables which will change it, and drastically, you know what I mean? So if you were doing black, I've done full resprays on black cars before with 2 coats of base coat. Like, it was full covered after the first coat. That was solvent, to be fair. And these days I probably would just put a third coat on, but that was a long time ago. But yes, I did get away with 2 full coats on a full respray. You know, are you painting your jams? What color is it? Yeah, so if you've got a color like this, for instance, let's just use this as a good example. You're painting your engine bay, underneath your bonnet, inside your boot lid, all of that, all your door jams, all the inside of your doors. You'd probably want the best part of 10 liters of color. Now that's mixed, to be clear, right? So that's another thing. Are you talking about pre-mixed, or are you talking, or pre-thinned, or unthinned? You know, that's going to make another you know, drastic change in the amount that you're going to need. So like I say, and again, what brand of paint are you using? What line are you using? Well, some brand might use 1-to-1 thinning ratio. One might use 2-to-1 thinning ratio. So there really isn't a one size fits all. But I used to, for like this, and this is a big car. Like this has got big bonnets, big roofs, big boot lids. So that's also going to change it. But I found generally for a medium sized car, inside and outside, I used to just get 4 liters unthinned, right? So that was 2-to-1. That was my old rule of thumb. And to be fair, I'm thinking that was back in the solvent days. So that would turn 2-to-1 would turn into 6 liters all up. But like I say, if it was a poor hider, like a color like this, you'd up that, and you would probably be up to that, you know, 10 liters mixed. But yes, paint is not cheap, so you do want to get those things right. Ask the right questions, ask the right people of those questions before you go and order the paint for a car. But that's about it, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy watching. Hopefully I didn't rant too much for you guys. Hopefully you followed. Until next time, get out there and paint some shit. Gunman out.